I love some good lighting, you know?
I do.
I love some good
I
lighting.
love that you can be aware of that.
I'm like,
It's never a thought of mine.
and I was over here like before we started, I'm like, well, what's kind of a complementary but opposite color? I was like, we got purple, oh, like a blue green, like a sea foam. I was like, yes. Welcome to another episode of the Tripping Off podcast with trauma focused hypnotherapy. Today, we're talking about one of the newsletter emails that we had sent out a couple weeks ago is a reminder to all the hypnotherapists and to anyone listening that I think there is this expectation inside of counseling and therapy that we're going to talk about your mother. And sometimes, many times, we do talk about your mother, but that's not always the right choice. There are sometimes more effective means, and sometimes you just need to get over something or work through something and have some success towards that goal rather than going and digging up the past. It's actually one of the things that people tell me all the time. They're like, are we going to talk about my childhood again?
Absolutely.
I did that with my past 3 therapists. I don't want to have to do it all over.
Well, just to add to that too is like I don't think that there's ever a situation where just the past should be the content of the conversation.
Yeah, it's auxiliary or supporting at best.
Yeah. I tell clients a lot, like we do have to go back to talk about those things, but not to talk about them to fix them, to change them. They're fixed points in your history. And on top of that, what's most important, way more important than even what happened to you, is why your psyche wants to continue bringing that thing from the past to the present to dictate to you what's going to happen in the future. And that's the point that so many clients, I think, miss because of our profession, is why is it important for my system to continually be affected by this situation? Why must I continue with this experience of whatever that trauma was?
Yeah, and so you see, it's only like, I mean, the times that we're talking about somebody's childhood or their mom or their dad is only in the context of why it's creating an obstacle for you achieving the goals that you want in the future. I mean, because it's all supposed to
Yeah.
be future oriented. And so just because you're going to counseling doesn't mean that you need to dig up the past. I mean, I've even had some clients where it's like, I know their story and it's horrific, right? But that's not the issue at hand. So we don't need to go and dig through that stuff. You know, if I bump into something, I'll ask, okay, you want to accomplish this, but you're doing this. Where's that coming from? And then it's like, oh, well, you know, I've done that since forever and my mom did that. And so I learned it from my mom. Okay, now we'll go and explore that. But you see, it's only in the context of where we're trying to head for health.
Exactly. And I think that so many therapists miss that because they're just like, oh, well, what can you do to fix that? You can't.
Yeah. It becomes like it becomes like mental health gossip.
Yeah.
It's like when you think about workplace environments and
That's
you know
great.
good friendships, gossip is a lot of fun. It's really enjoyable just to be like, well, she did this and he did that. Did you
Yeah.
believe this or did you see that? It's really fun because I think there's a bit of an elevated sense of ego, right? If I can talk about like how terrible my parents were or how messed up my cousin is, and I feel better about myself because it's like, well, they're a mess.
And I can justify even bad behavior.
Ooh, yes.
You know,
That's a good point
can
too.
you see how bad it was for me? That's why that's why I'm scared of. Can you see like it was really bad? Like that makes sense, right? And it's almost like a validation to. It's a validation to sabotage.
Yeah. What? I'm allowed to sabotage.
Yeah.
Because look at how bad it was.
You would too, wouldn't you?
I've made it a habit of asking my clients when they like drop something really, really like horrible. You know, I'll be like, I'll just kind of stare at them for a second. I'll be like, how do you want me to respond to that? I just ask them. They're like, you know, and then if they look at
That's
me
good.
sideways, which they often
they
do, I'll say, I'll explain myself and I'll be like, well, see, here's the thing. On the one hand, that's a really horrible situation. And so there's a part of me that's deeply empathetic to it and wishes that you never had to go through that. But there's another part of me that realizes whenever you tell this to somebody, they look at you and say, "Oh, poor baby." And
Yeah.
that is a suggestion that you are small. And it's a suggestion that what happened to you is so terrible that you might not ever get over it. And I'll be damned if I'm one of those voices who perpetuates that lie. And
Absolutely.
that's usually exactly what I say. I'm like, "How do you want me to respond to that?" And they're like, "No one's ever said that." And I'm like, "Yeah, because there's two pieces to this, and I want to accurately share with you both."
Well, that's interesting too, because I'm thinking about it and just empathizing with that person that I've seen 100 times, a
Yeah.
thousand times is when we're reiterating a story, especially a story that's traumatic, what we're doing is we're searching for something that can help us reprocess that. Well, if
Mm.
everybody's response to that is always more trauma or validating the trauma, then it's not going to actually give us what we want, which is a different way to respond to it. Like, oh, it's so terrible that this thing happened to me. Like, right? Yeah, poor baby. I'm exaggerating for the sake of proving the point, but if everybody is like, yeah, that must have been so tough.
Yeah, I mean, you're exaggerating, but I've heard it.
Yeah.
I've heard it. "Oh my god. That. Oh my god, that's so terrible." Or, "I'm so sorry to hear that," which is the worst of all because the implicit suggestion is, "I'm sorry that you told me that. I wish you hadn't.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to hear that." You're not sorry that it happened. You're sorry to have heard it.
I'm sorry that's affecting you. Is even like it shouldn't. Like don't let that affect you. Well, it does.
Yeah, gross suggestion too.
Yeah.
We gotta be careful with our words.
Well, I think that's why it's so important, at least for me, is well, I take that back. This is just important. Uh
To everyone.
yes. It's important that we take that and we give them a new experience. And I think that's the foundation of especially Ericksonian hypnotherapy.
Yes.
The
Yes.
what we're talking about is this quote by Erickson that I think is just so powerful. Is he would say this often. He would say, Nobody changes unless there's a current experience of a future projection, of a future experience."
You know, I always try and quote that, but I fuck it up. You said it right.
I'm not actually sure if I said it right.
Well, you said it better than I say it. Because I stumble over that last part. A present experience of a future projection.
Yeah, like,
That's really good. A present experience of a future projection, which is the topic of today's podcast.
yeah, it's when we're sharing those traumatic events, what we're looking for is some sort of resolution, which implies a future experience. I don't want to be feeling like this anymore.
Mm.
I don't want to be experiencing whatever my experience is right now. What I want is to have a different experience, which is in the future.
Right.
But how can that be if people are just reiterating and resuggesting to me that my past experience was bad every time I want a new experience?
Yeah, and I think the part that this beginning section is trying to convey is I think there's two reasons that people will hold on to that. And we'll talk about the past. One is it makes me feel good because look, I'm doing better than my parents did, right?
Yeah.
Or at least I'm not doing as bad as this person or that person. And then the other one is by saying and having mental health gossip rather than mental health therapy, I'm giving myself license to continue to self-sabotage, which is, I mean, really satisfying in the moment, but I mean, totally damaging to your future.
Well, it brings it from a 10 down to an 8.
Sure,
But
sure. Doesn't actually, well, you know, and this is where people spend years and years and years in therapy, but never actually get anywhere because they just spend all this time like giving themselves license to continue in their dysfunction because of gossip about the past. And so today we're talking about and reminding therapists and those who are in therapy that it's so important to think about the future. And yeah, I think there's a lot of therapy modalities that do this, but they often do it at the dismissal of the past or of the feelings. And I think I like hypnotherapy a lot because it combines both. It has an appreciation and an understanding of the past while also being heavily focused on the future. And so sometimes when I talk with therapists or students of the course, they'll be like, "What do I do with this client in this session?" I'll be like, "Well, give them the experience of what resolution would feel like. I'm coming in because I'm afraid of flying. Great. Paint them a picture in their mind's eye while they're in deep trance of flying with absolute peace and even joy and excitement at the potential and the anticipation of the destination.
Yeah, wherever they are, whether that's imagery of them actually in an airplane flying,
Mm-hmm.
or that might be too much.
It's a good point. It could be.
So then give them like the Superman ability to fly by themselves. Control.
That's
Or
cool. I like the idea of being Superman.
right?
Yeah, that's fun.
Or even sending something off, like, I don't know, build a giant paper airplane. Then when they launch it, it turns into an actual airplane, and they have to do a magic spell or something to turn it into an airplane. And when it takes off, and just give them that control over, yeah, right,
I love magic wands.
right,
Such good symbolism, magic wands. For many reasons.
in so many ways.
I love the sparkles that shoot out the tip. Oh man, so many are that way too, and it's good. But yeah, I love that. I don't know. I haven't even thought about that. Like being Superman for fear of flying, or building a paper airplane for fear of flying. That's really good.
Yeah,
I
like
haven't done that.
well, you have maybe not that specific, but
No, yeah, not
yeah.
like that. That's good. Well, that's a difference in our styles. I love that. Hmm. Yeah, so I think there's three topics that we're kind of bringing up here today. There's three, I think, suggestions of ways that you can do this. There's millions of ways, but three that we're going to talk about today that you can do right now if you're a client, and that you can do this week with your clients if you're a therapist. One is very literal, right? And so we call it future pacing. And so future pacing is where we kind of put out the idea of what our future, our ideal future will be like, and then we sort of pace backwards to get the steps in order to get there, right? So I think the one that I was thinking about in my head, and maybe you can think of one too, is like fear of public speaking. Right.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of public speaking. I got this big presentation coming up. And so it's like, great. What we're going to do today in hypnosis is we're going to put you into a deep formal trance, and we're going to very literally walk the literal steps into the auditorium, right? Up to the stage, up to the mic, the lights are in your face, and you experience this huge sense of calm and peace and confidence. You've never felt so connected with who you are. All these people eager to hear whatever it is that you have to say, and any fear, any weight, any pressure of society and expectation falls from your shoulders, and you deliver exactly what's on your heart. And that makes the entire audience that much better. That's very literal. It's very nice. And so some
Feeling calm.
people,
I'm feeling calm,
I
right?
know, right? And so sometimes, especially with things that are a little bit more straightforward like that, like fear of public speaking or fear of flying, um, just very literal stuff can be really helpful. Anything comes to your mind?
It's just so nice. Well, yeah, you also gave, and so talking about meeting them where they are, as far as like pacing, is that might be too much for them. Like somebody might be like, I don't want to go there. I think earlier you said something about like walking in the woods and getting to talk to a whole bunch of gnomes, like,
Yeah.
and those gnomes are, they're inconsequential, like they don't mean anything.
They're make believe.
Yeah, they're make believe. They're just like little gnomes.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe depending on what culture you're from, that might
that's
be a
true.
bad one. uh,
There's like gnomes.
yeah.
I think they're cool.
And so I think that's it. It's good to create that pacing backwards from whatever that goal is, especially from that client's perspective. Like whatever images they have, that you can already use, whatever they're probably doing whatever they're afraid of
Mm-hmm.
in a different context, perfectly fine.
Ooh, good point.
In some way, they're doing that in principle. I don't know
That's
that
a
I've
good
ever.
reminder.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever been like worked with a client where they're just like, I'm afraid of public speaking. I need to public speak, and I have no area in my life where I feel confident in conveying information.
Yeah, never happens. Never happens. It's only the therapist's lack of creativity that
Yeah.
creates the roadblock. There's always something. And that's a great point that I think every therapist should hear is there's always an area of a client's life that you can pull from for inspiration for the target area.
Yeah,
Right. And so it's like, well, struggling with my relationship, struggling with public speaking, struggling with confidence. There's some area somewhere that you can pull from confidence or relationships with, even if it's make believe. Right. I've even pulled from storybooks.
sure.
And so they like have this deep
Absolutely.
connection with, I got one who loves like the really romantic, steamy vampire novels.
Nice.
I was like, that's great. And so they connect with the main character and they see themselves as part of this character who's very confident,
Perfect.
like sexually confident. And so I'm like, that's great. Maybe you don't feel sexual confidence here, but you have experienced it through this story. And that's why you love these stories. Let's pull and put it over here.
Yeah.
It's the
So
same psychic energy.
that's great. Like maybe they can't imagine themselves getting up on a in front of a podium and speaking. Maybe they can't imagine themselves doing that at any one of those levels that you want to work up to.
Right.
But maybe they can envision that protagonist doing it. And if they've already identified with that protagonist, it's going to be part of their higher self that's going to be up on that stage. So, like, maybe you put them in the front row and get them to watch this protagonist, like, give a speech about sexual freedom.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful.
They're so great. Like, oh, and they're really talking about themselves.
But they do it in a context where they don't see that they're doing it for themselves because it kind of bypasses the prefrontal cortex critical,
Mm-hmm.
which is great. If you can build that emotional feeling, it's easily translatable.
And the suggestion is just like in that.
Oh yeah, it's already there.
Yeah.
You don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
The suggestion's done.
Wow. And then you just like work them up. Like, man, that I don't know. Susan is the protagonist.
Sure, love it.
Susan is so
Susan,
amazing.
the sexually liberated vampire.
Susan
I
is
see
so
it.
confident. Susan is so wonderful. Look how calm she is. Look how much of a strong woman she is. Like look at how effectively she's conveying that message. Like look at her. She's so great. Yeah, she is great.
She is great.
Yeah. I do identify with Susan.
There it is.
Yeah.
There it is. I'll say another way to do the future pacing, if somebody is a little bit resistant or like maybe it's just too difficult for you to think about you successfully accomplishing the goal, like maybe that's so far removed or so difficult, there's too much criticism, I'll take them past the goal. Right. So it's like you already gave
Yeah,
the
that's great.
speech. And so everyone's coming up and congratulating you and telling you what they saw or telling you how they experienced you giving that speech. And so sometimes you can even go further in the future. Right. And depending on how far removed, because of how anxiety producing the situation is, you can just keep going in the future. So maybe they can experience the kudos and congratulations of the audience members 10 minutes after the speech. Or maybe that's too much. Maybe they read about it the next week in an online article, right? So you see, I'm creating safety buffer. Maybe that's even too much. And so they think about their grandkids saying a story about, well, my grandmother, was so confident and she was a accomplished public speaker. And so you can take that future pacing as far as you need to create comfort and then kind of bring it back. It's like focusing, like
Yeah.
a camera lens or like glasses, right? It's like, okay, well, we don't have to like nail it on the first try. We can start very blurry and start to close in on accuracy.
And they'll give you that feedback too. Even
Yeah.
if you just like try one that's like very, very safe at first and they're just like, yeah, that was fine. Push them a little bit. Like make it a little bit more difficult.
Hmm.
But I mean, just even thinking about I did this a little while ago. The equivalent of it is like giving them the suggestion of what it's like and who they would be after they've given 1,000 speeches.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So taking 1,000 speeches into the future.
Yeah.
That's good.
Just like, yeah, what is it going to be like when this is like boring and you got to add to it? And then our conversation in the next session was like, yeah, well, like let's talk about that person you in the future in in the equivalent of 1,000 speeches is, like what is that person going to do to mix it up so it's not so boring when you have to give another speech?
And some people do.
Yeah.
They'll do silly things.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I do. I love doing that.
I don't know if I've gotten there yet, but I haven't done anything silly while I'm trying to give a speech to keep myself entertained.
I will, especially if it's being recorded, I will give, one of my favorite things is to give sign language cues to people that might be deaf of heart or hard of hearing.
Oh, that's great.
So like mix them in there that are just like totally like antithetical to what I'm talking about or like overly sexual. And it's only somebody that knows sign language that
It's
could be
like,
able to pick up on it.
what was, did he
Did
just,
he just
yeah, he did. That's really funny. Yeah, yeah, I get it. In some ways, that might actually be relieving because it's like I'm attending to this over here, so I'm not giving my
Yeah.
speech too much attention.
Yeah, I think it started off as like a defense mechanism.
That makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. I'll say with clients, I've also had, so you can say, going way in the future and scaling it in. I've also gone right for the core and like been very literal and scaled it back, right? So, we're talking about giving someone a literal experience in hypnosis that may be kind of triggering. Zach is giving one example of starting way, way in the future. So it's not very triggering, and then getting more and more close to reality so that way you can kind of amp up the anxiety. I've also gone the other way too, and I know you have as well, where it's like we go exactly for the situation,
Get it.
and then I see how much we need to back off the gas pedal to get to a point where we're balancing between too much and not enough. And so I'll do that by like, you're standing there, the lights are bright in your face, everyone is absolute still and quiet, waiting for the first word to come out of your mouth. You see, I'm really building,
drop.
I'm building the intensity. And so then I notice, I'm like, how much are they squirming? How much are they sweating? Like, what is their heart rate changing in their neck? Like, I'm watching everything as they're in this trance. And if I notice it's a little bit too much, which is fine, I'm trying to find where that limit is. I'll say, and then your vision starts to get blurry and things start to grow dark. And you sort of pull out and you realize you're sitting in a calm library reading a story. And that this was all your visualization of the story that you're reading on the page of this Susan giving an amazing speech. And so you see, I started literal and I pulled back, where you can start pulled back and get more literal. So you can go both ways too. And I think depending on different clients, I'll use different techniques for whatever they need.
Yeah, well, that's the point about pacing.
Right.
Is it's the principle, and then you can do that whatever way you need because you're never going to be able to understand exactly the perfect metaphor for that moment and the perfect strength of that metaphor.
No.
It's more like a massaging out of the anxiety than just like giving them a shot of cortisol.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's another angle that we can talk about, going more from the somatic route,
Which I think is great.
which I think is really great. Yeah. And so when I say somatic, I just mean like more connected with your body. And so instead of focusing so much on the environment or the situation, focusing on how that is experienced internally, right? So kind of a shift of focus from extra perspective to intra perspective, where I'm not going to really talk much about what's happening in the audience or with the lights. I'm going to talk about how they experience their heart rate speeding up. They can experience their palms getting sweaty and clammy. They can feel how their toes grow numb and tingly, how they can feel the hair on the back of their neck standing up. And then as they begin to control their diaphragm and slow their heart rate as they speak, everything calms down and comes into perspective. And they start to breathe from deep inside themselves rather than shallow and at the top of their throat. And so we focus more on somatics rather than the environment, which is also very helpful. And for those who experience the world a little bit more physically rather than ideologically, that's a really good direction to go because personality is going to play a huge difference in which one of these tools for future projection I'm going to use.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that it's great for any personality type, but so much more greater for the physical. And it's setting up that scene. It's such a great like coping mechanism too for like in that space where they're actually doing it.
Yeah.
Because in that way they can actually take that with them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing enough of those suggestions being somatic, if enough of your suggestions are somatic, then they just jump into their bodies when they're in that uncomfortable setting.
Yeah. Which is a great suggestion too. It's like, I mean, I know with this future stuff and even with hypnosis, like you might roll your eyes because we make a lot of sexual metaphors, but so much of the ego and the unconscious is sexual in its metaphorical expression
Yeah.
that that's why we use it. And so, when I say this, I mean that some of the somatic stuff can be almost like self-pleasure or masturbatory in sort of suggestion. And that's really good because, like, in the example of giving a public speech, that is what's happening, right?
Yeah.
I am sort of massaging and personally pleasuring myself with my own thoughts and the development of my own thoughts, and I'm taking an audience along with me on that self-pleasuring journey, and they're deriving sort of voyeuristic or pleasure
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody's like, what? I mean, why would you go listen to somebody speak, but besides to gain or glean something that's pleasurable?
Yeah, and
Like,
how much better when it's pleasurable to the speaker. You don't wanna listen to a speaker who doesn't care about the topic, or it's
no.
painful for the topic. I'd be concerned. It's a little bit of, like, dominatrix kinda stuff going like, "Oh, yeah, he hates this.
You're
Mm."
right.
Not me, man, I don't know. Usually not when public speaking or like a musical artist, right? Musical artist who hates playing their genre. That's a bummer, dude.
Well, it's not really a thing. Like
No, it just doesn't exist.
because you're not going to get good at it, and you go to listen to somebody speak because they're good at something.
Well, maybe
And
band class in high school. That's why no one
sure,
that's why no one goes to listen to those unless you're the parent, because it's not good.
or orchestra.
Orchestra, yeah, there you go. There you go. Some personal experience, Zach. Oh boy.
Well, I think it's like we don't pay attention to all of those suggestions as
Yeah.
much as maybe, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but as much as we probably should or is good for us. For example, like even if it's just like, well, no, I'm just going to learn. Well, why are you going to learn? So you can gain some sort of satisfaction, some sort of expertise. It's a self-soothing, it's a stimming technique for the brain. And so in this like somatic work thing, what we're trying to do is give somebody a way to stem in a way that's also beneficial for getting whatever the thing is out.
Yeah. People who claim to not do things for self-pleasure scare me a little bit because there's a level of dishonesty and then further a level of self-deception and deceit
Yeah.
that is woefully harmful and scary.
Yeah.
Everything should be done for pleasure. Like the reason you should be able to identify that. Like the reason that you're doing something or the reason that something is a goal should be because it makes me happy. If you're doing it out of a sense of obligation or duty without recognizing that obligation and duty also brings you a sense of pride and happiness, you can get into some weird situations where you're doing things but denying the pleasurable aspects of those things, and then it gets like a horror movie. It's this weird sadistic like area. And so yeah, I do this because it makes me feel good. It's masturbatory in nature. That good.
Good.
That's
Yeah.
simple. That's simple, that's straightforward, that's healthy.
when when I hate conversations as a metaphor for this.
Yeah.
I hate when somebody's just like, well, I'm okay if they're saying like I'm tired or transitions are hard for me, but when somebody
Mm.
like overly like protests because it's Monday. Oh God, it's Monday again. I gotta go to work. I'm like, then quit. Then quit.
Then quit.
Then quit. Don't do that unless you like complaining about it. If you like complaining about it, just let me know, and then I'll just
There
be
it
like,
is.
I'll lay it on hard. Yeah, fuck Mondays. They're so stupid. Like, oh God, like sure, we can play that game if you want to, as
Yeah.
long as there's a consciousness about it.
Yes.
But when there's the unconscious suggestion about it, that's what we're getting at as far as giving somebody a somatic stimming technique to visualize before the thing, so that when they get in there, they have that. This really brings us to the last point, which is like
Yeah.
some sort of anchor to get grounded, to pay attention, to be present with whole self rather than just a one or a couple parts. And so when we give them that somatic stimming kind of ability to go, like actually, I do want to do this is painful, but I want to do this. This is not natural for me, but I really like the outcomes of this. Then what that does for them is it balances out the whatever we're accommodating.
Right. Right. Cold showers in the morning. Hate them. But I feel really good afterwards, and
Yeah.
I'm very awake for the day. Going to the gym. Don't like it. I would much rather sit there, eat Cheetos, play video games. But I like how I feel the next day.
Yeah.
I like the way I look, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, isn't that kind of narcissistic? No, that's a different diagnosis.
Yeah.
Going to the gym because I like the way I look is really healthy, right? Learning and reading a book because I like how it makes me smarter is really healthy. And enjoying your intelligence, enjoying your body is really good. And I tell my interns this all the time because, well, and clients too, because sometimes they get a little nervous about pumping their clients up too much. They're like, well, where's the line between confidence and narcissism? And I'm like, the line is simple. And it upsets me that more people don't understand the line because it's so simple. The difference is you should be as outrageously confident and proud of yourself as a narcissist is. The difference is confidence doesn't take anything from anybody else.
Yeah.
Narcissism needs to put other people down in order to feel good. Confidence does not. I'm incredible, and you are too. That's confidence. Narcissism is, I'm so much better than Zach.
I have the greatest example of this.
Yeah.
Just last night we were going to a soccer game, and I have like I love my truck. For everybody out there, I love my truck. I paid it off years ago.
I love a good paid off vehicle.
Yeah,
Oh, man.
like it was a work truck that is just like old reliable. I love this truck.
It's a good truck.
And I park at the game at the game, and this guy gets out, and he's in a brand new, souped up, biggest, nicest version of this truck. And I go, "Hey, man, like that's a sweet truck." And then he like looks at me, and first of all, guys don't know how to take compliments.
This is true.
And so he like, what? Thanks. And then like he looks at my truck, and like he almost like wants to say like you too, but my truck's not nice.
Not like that.
No, not like that. Not like anything like the compliment that he was obviously like so wanting.
Yeah, your truck is nice because of the stories that have been lived out in that truck.
Exactly. And I love that, but like I was just like laughing. Like you don't have to give me inside. I just left it, but inside I was
Yeah.
like, you don't have to give me a compliment too. But it was one of those moments like after he like got out of his body and was just like, this feels so good. Like he complimented my truck.
That's why I got it.
That's exactly why I got it. And I spent so much money and so much effort, and this is everything that I wanted. And then he's just like, I don't know what to do with my hands now. And then he literally just like walks away.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
But the point about that though is because of whatever this thing is inside of us, especially in our culture, is we're so bad at being okay with something just being pleasurable. Like we're so bad at that.
Yeah.
We're so bad at being able to just be like, yeah, thanks, man. Like like I needed that.
Yeah.
And
We kind of suck at it.
if like if he was a client of mine, or like if one of my clients comes back and shares the story with me, I'm going to be like, why was there that downfall on the other side of that compliment, that it felt like you didn't know what to do? And I think that that's the point there with like an anchor, or but also with the somatic work that we're doing with our clients that we're talking about today is that when you can give them something that can go like, yeah, I want to take this feeling with me. That's not narcissistic.
No.
It's not like, yeah, like I'm okay with letting that brighten my day.
Yeah. You ever been around somebody whose day is bright It makes your day brighter too.
It's nice.
It's yeah. And so, man,
It's not narcissistic.
it's certainly not. And that's the difference between the two. And just to further prove the point, like how many clients have I had come and sit on this couch and tell me that they struggle to make positive relationships or struggle to make new friends.
Exactly.
And then they talk to me about their life and who they are and how they are, and they're apologetic for everything. They're not happy about anything in their life. They don't feel confident or assured of themselves in any area. And so I'm like, well, you may be doing all the right friendship making tools, but you're kind of a miserable person. No offense to you. I don't think that's like a statement of who you are as a human, but you are miserable to be around. That's a statement of fact. That is changeable. But you got to have a little confidence, my friend.
Yeah. And
So,
like and be okay with that confidence
yeah.
and I mean, to take a step further, like love that confidence.
Well, damn, and I think that's really the crux of the whole thing. I think a lot of people learn to let go of or hide their confidence because there was somebody who was narcissistic in their life that felt personally threatened by their confidence. And so, if you've grown up with a parent that way, if you've grown up with a friend that way, if you've grown up with a mentor in your life who is that way, any display of your confidence or positive attitude felt like a direct threat to them. And that's not healthy, but it teaches that individual that in order to get along and in order to be accepted, I have to hide my confidence.
Yeah.
And so unlearning those habits was important and takes some time. So I understand where it comes from too.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for a therapist and a hypnotherapist to very directly address that why. Your confidence makes the world a better place, not the other way around.
Yeah. And then, I mean, going back to even the very beginning is like, if you could make that the anchor,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Oh, yeah.
Susan, you said
Susan,
Susan,
man.
like that ties right back into that.
Yeah, it does. So that's kind of the last point on the list here is sometimes a great way to work with it and a really fun way to work with it is guided imagery. That focuses more on the emotions. So we talked about literal, we talked about body, and now we're talking about emotions. When you're talking about projecting into the future, sometimes the mind can really get in the way. I can't feel calm in my body. I can't feel confident when I'm up on stage. Okay, well, can you talk to a little rose garden full of gnomes?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Of course you can. It's because it's make believe. So you can make believe that you have these positive emotions too, right? I can't be confident because if I'm confident, then I'll be punished. Because when I was little, I was punished for being confident. And it's like, okay, well, let's imagine that you are a baby dragon and you're around all your friend dragons and they're cheering you on as you learn how to fly. You can make up a pretend emotion because I'm making up a pretend scenario. And so it's,
I'm not a dragon.
yeah, I mean, how you identify is none of my business.
I'm not a dragon.
Whatever your gender identity is, that is your choice, not mine. I would love to use dragon pronouns for you for the rest of the week, though. That would make my week, absolutely.
What are dragon pronouns?
I have no idea. Someone put it in the comments or something. We need some dragon pronouns.
That's great.
Something with flame or something.
Yeah. Well, that's the point, though. Is like it's like
Flame flim?
flame phlegm.
He, him? Flame flim? I'm just being silly.
But that's the issue. Is it's like it is imaginary. Like I can create that in this imaginary state,
It's
and
all imaginary.
the goal, especially of this conversation, is to create a space today that is a recreation, a model for tomorrow
Mm-hmm.
based on the materials that we have to work with from the past. So we're building a future, but the building materials are what we have from the past.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why it's so important. There's always an avenue Like even if it feels like there is no confidence anywhere, there's somewhere to pull confidence from. And
There
those
is.
emotions can be translated. And I hope that's encouraging to everyone listening to this. Like you never lose those things. They may get very much hidden, very much buried, but they're always there somewhere. It just takes a creative hypnotherapist to come alongside and to say, let me help you explore. Let's explore together. And that's really pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, enjoy creating some confidence, some imaginary places inside your mind. That'll be fun. And I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, bye.